Good morning, everybody! Welcome back to my channel. My name is Kris, this is Wizard Way, and welcome back to Hobbit Hump Day, the final Hobbit Hump Day, because today we are going to be finishing the final chapters of J.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit. So this is where I read The Hobbit so you don't have to. Welcome back, everybody. Sorry about the later than normal stream today. I had a bout of insomnia last night that kept me up until like 6 or 7 a.m. It was not good. So I was crashed until about noon. But now that I'm awake, it's time for Hobbit Hump Day. So, Hobbits! I know, right? It's the final Hobbit Hump Day. It's the final Hump Day. Do-do-do-do. Do-do-do-do-do. How's everyone doing? Welcome. Hello, guys. Welcome. If you're over on TikTok, please take a second to follow the link in my bio over to my YouTube channel. That's where I need the minutes watched. So if you're going to be watching me and listening to me read anyway, it would be super helpful if you do that over on YouTube instead. I appreciate it. You don't have to, but if you do, thank you. Hey, Willow! Welcome back. So, Hobbit Hump Day, man. I almost missed the stream today, not gonna lie. I woke up so late, I was just like, I'm not even gonna do it. Like, no. But it turns out that plans that I was trying to make for this afternoon didn't work out, and that's fine. So it meant that I had a couple hours to spare, so let's do this. Today's stream is going to be a little bit shorter than typical because it is the end of the book. We only have 2 chapters to go, I think. Yeah, 2 chapters to go. As such, this isn't gonna take very long. Typically we go through about 40 to 45 pages. Today's reading is only gonna be like 30, I think. Less than. It's less than 30. So we'll go through it a bit more quickly. Poor Bilbo. I know, he just wants to read by his fireplace. He just wants the comforts of his hobbit hole. And I mean, mood. I mean, like, isn't that all of us? Poor Bilbo. He's a sweet guy. And I love the reactions that he got when he was like, yeah, so my portion of the treasure, I just took the Arkenstone. And that's probably not the wisest move I've ever made, but I did it, and here you go. It is the biggest bargaining chip you could hope for. Don't fuck it up. He says to Bard and Thranduil, the Elven King. And they're just like, Did he just do that? You can't do that. And he's like, well, I just did. I'm gonna be missed if I don't get back to camp, so I'm gonna go. Bye. That's about it. Exactly like that. So yeah, he snuck back up to his camp without anybody noticing. So when we last left off, which the last chapter was A Thief in the Night, we left off with, at midnight he woke up Bombur, who was the one that he was like, oh, I'll take your watch shift. Everything's fine, just go to sleep. I'll wake you up so you can wake up the next person, and then you don't have to stand watch. Don't be suspicious. At midnight he woke up Bombur, and then in turn rolled himself up in his corner, without listening to the old dwarf's thanks, which he felt he hardly earned. He was soon fast asleep, forgetting all his worries till morning. As a matter of fact, he was dreaming of eggs and bacon. So he just wants to be back in his hobbit hole, and I don't blame him. He's been through some shit. Poor Mr. End of a Bag. Having to deal with those dwarves, get themselves into trouble every new place they go. I know, right? I mean, Bilbo does commendably. Like, we can agree on that. Bilbo does really commendably. He does more than was ever required of him. So Gandalf made a good choice. Eggs and bacon. I want eggs and bacon. I should have had more to eat before starting the stream. But I was like, no, I'm gonna start it, and we're gonna do the thing, and then it'll be done, and I'll feel really accomplished, and I can move on with the other things I have to do today, which include Elvish translations. So if you're watching and you want something random translated into Elvish, that's what I do. That's how I pay my bills. So yeah, catch me outside. How about that? Basically, go to my website. Go to elfboy.com. There's a contact page on the About Me area. There's a contact page. Fill out the form. It goes directly to its own email address that I watch like a hawk. So, I see every message that goes there. Whereas my normal email address, things get lost in the shuffle. Like, don't message me on Instagram anymore. Don't do that, guys. That was before I had my website up. But shall we get started, though? Let's get started. Bikini bottom slushy? What? No idea what you're talking about, but cool. Alright, so got our Gimli bookmark. Let's get started. So we have 2 chapters that we'll be doing today to finish up the book. So that's chapters 17 and 18. Chapter 17 is The Clouds Burst, and 18 is The Return Journey. So things are going to come to a head, and then we get our final resolution. When you read The Hobbit, you crave honey on toast during Beorn's chapter. Oh yeah, for sure. That makes perfect sense. I don't think I've ever had honey on toast. There wasn't a lot of honey when I was growing up, which is probably a pity. I feel like if I had had a bit more honey, I would have had less allergic reactions to shit. And then eggs and bacon for most of the others. Yeah, I mean, eggs and bacon are great. As long as you know, aren't a vegan. If you're a vegan, then honey on toast. Honey on toast, there you go. You can even be gluten-free and do honey on toast. Just has to be a different kind of toast. Alright, let's get started, shall we? I'm eager to read the last bit of the book. Like I've mentioned before, I haven't read the book cover to cover in a long time, so this is really fun for me. Alrighty. So welcome everybody, welcome back to The Hobbit, chapter 17, The Clouds Burst. Next day, the trumpets rang early in the camp. Soon, a single runner was seen hurrying along the narrow path. At a distance he stood and hailed them, asking whether Thorin would now listen to another embassy, since new tidings had come to hand and matters were changed. "That will be Dane," said Thorin when he heard. They will have got wind of his coming." He's so cocky. "I thought that would alter their mood. Bid them come, few in number and weaponless, and I will hear," he called to the messenger. About midday, the banners of the forest and the lake were seen to be borne forth again. A company of 20 was approaching. At the beginning of the narrow way, they laid aside sword and spear and came on towards the gate. Wondering, the dwarves saw that among them were both Bard and the Elven King, before whom an old man, wrapped in cloak and hood, bore a strong casket of iron-bound wood. "Hail, Thorin," said Bard. "Are you still of the same mind?" "My mind does not change with the rising and setting of a few suns," answered Thorin. "Did you come to ask me idle questions? Still the elf host has not departed as I bade. Till then you come in vain to bargain with me." "Is there then nothing for which you would yield any of your gold?" "Nothing that you or your friends have to offer." "What of the Arkenstone of Thrain?" said he, and at the same moment the old man opened the casket and held aloft the jewel. The light leapt from his hand, bright and white in the morning. Then Thorin was stricken dumb with amazement and confusion. No one spoke for a long while. Thorin at length broke the silence, and his voice was thick with wrath. "That stone was my father's, and is mine," he said. "Why should I purchase my own?" But wonder overcame him, and he added, "But how came you by the heirloom of my house, if there is need to ask such question of thieves?" "We are not thieves," Bard answered. "Your own we will give back in return for our own." "How came you by it?" shouted Thorin in gathering rage. "I gave it to them," squeaked Bilbo, who was peering over the wall, by now in a dreadful fright. You! cried Thorin, turning upon him and grasping him with both hands. "You miserable hobbit! You undersized burglar!" he shouted at a loss for words, and he shook poor Bilbo like a rabbit. "By the beard of Durin, I wish I had Gandalf here. Curse him for his choice of you. May his beard wither. As for you, I will throw you to the rocks," he cried, and lifted Bilbo in his arms. "Stay! Your wish is granted," said a voice. The old man with the casket threw aside his hood and cloak. "Here is Gandalf. And none too soon, it seems. If you don't like my burglar, please don't damage him. Put him down and listen first to what he has to say." "You all seem in league," said Thorin, dropping Bilbo on the top of the wall. "Never again will I have dealings with any wizard or his friends. What have you to say, you descended rats?" Dear me, said Bilbo. "I'm sure this is all very uncomfortable. You may remember saying that I may choose my own 14th share. Perhaps I took it too literally. I have been told that dwarves are sometimes politer in word than in deed. This time was, all the same, when you seemed to think that I had been of some service. Descendant of rats, indeed. Is this all the service of you and your family that I was promised, Thorin? Take it that I have disposed of my share as I wished, and let it go at that." Poor Bilbo. "I will," said Thorin grimly, "and I will let you go at that, and may we never meet again." Then he turned and spoke over the wall. "I am betrayed," he said. It was rightly guessed that I could not forbear to redeem the Arkenstone, the treasure of my house. For it I will give 1/14th share of the hoard, in silver and gold, setting aside the gems. But that shall be accounted the promised share of this traitor. And with that reward he shall depart, and you can divide it as you will. He will get little enough, I doubt not. Take him, if you wish him to live, and no friendship of mine goes with him." There should be an end quote there, it's missing. Oops. Oh no, I'm wrong, he continues. "Get down now to your friends," he said to Bilbo, "or I will throw you down." "What about the gold and silver?" asked Bilbo. "That shall follow after, as can be arranged," said he. "Get down." "Until then we keep the stone," cried Bard. "You are not making a very splendid figure as king under the mountain," said Gandalf, "but things may change yet." "They may indeed," said Thorin. And already so strong was the bewilderment of the treasure upon him, he was pondering whether by the help of Dane he might not recapture the Arkenstone and withhold the share of the reward. And so Bilbo was swung down from the wall and departed with nothing for all his trouble, except the armor which Thorin had given him already. More than one of the dwarves in their hearts felt shame and pity at his going. "Farewell," he cried to them. "We may meet again as friends." "Be off," called Thorin. "You have mail upon you which was made by my folk and is too good for you. It cannot be pierced by arrows, but if you do not hasten, I will sting your miserable feet. So be swift." kitten. Everyone say hello to Alana. Hi, kitten bit. Come here. Hi, kitten. This is my kitty. What do you think, kitten? Ow. Don't put your claws in my armpit, you silly girl. It's morning cuddle time, even though it's 2:30 p.m. Okay, go on, kitten. Thank you. You're wet, too. Did you just have a drink of water? Silly kitty. Hi, Birdman. Hello, KP Birdman. Welcome back. And hello, Lane. I didn't see you come in. I don't know why. Yes, I did. I read your messages. I'm just blind. Sorry. Yeah, stiff neck of the king dwarf under the mountain. No kidding. There's a term for that, actually. There's an elvish term for literally stiff-necked. So it's used for when people are stubborn or obstinate. It's tarlang. Tarlang is stiff-necked. I love how I know that. I used that in a recent translation. It's the only reason I know that bit of vocabulary. Because someone had me translate "death be not proud," as if they are speaking to death. So instead of using death, I used the Sindarin name for Namo. Namo is the Lord of the Dead. He runs the halls of Mandos. He is the doomsman of the Valar. So he's in charge of death, fate, and time, basically. So he's the equivalent of death in Tolkien's world. So he has two versions of his name in Sindarin, and it's Bador and Badron. I think I used Badron. So Badhron. I love Elvish. Moving on, though. I got distracted. Okay, so Thorin was threatening Bilbo, that if he doesn't hasten, he'll sting his miserable feet. Be swift. Not so hasty, said Bard. We will give you until tomorrow. At noon we will return and see if you have brought from the hoard the portion that is to be set against the stone. If that is done without deceit, then we will depart, and the elf host will go back to the forest. In the meanwhile, farewell. With that they went back to the camp, but Thorin sent messengers by Roak, who was the really big raven, telling Dain of what had passed, and bidding him come with wary speed. Kitten, move it. What are you doing? Oh my gosh. Kitten, get out of there. Silly cat. Okay. Like, messing with the cameras. Okay, here we go. Alright. Do. Yeah, bidding him come with wary speed. Let's continue. That day passed, and the night. The next day the wind shifted west, and the air was dark and gloomy. The morning was still early when a cry was heard in the camp. Runners came in to report that a host of dwarves had appeared round the eastern spur of the mountain, and was now hastening to Dale. Dain had come. He had hurried on through the night, and so had come upon them sooner than they had expected. Each one of his folk was clad in a hauberk of steel mail that clung to his knees, and his legs were covered with hose of a fine and flexible metal mesh, the secret of whose making was possessed by Dain's people. The dwarves are exceedingly strong for their height, but most of these were strong even for dwarves. In battle they wielded heavy two-handed mattocks, but each of them had also a short broadsword at his side and a round shield slung at his back. Their beards were forked and plaited and thrust into their belts. I love that visual, that, like, they've plaited their beards very carefully and tucked them in. With all that armor and everything, they still tucked the beards in. Their caps were of iron, and they were shod with iron, and their faces were grim. Trumpets called men and elves to arms. Before long, the dwarves could be seen coming up the valley at a great pace. They halted between the river and the eastern spur. But a few held on their way, and crossing the river drew near the camp. And there they laid down their weapons and held up their hands in a sign of peace. Bard went out to meet them, and with him went Bilbo. "We are sent from Dain, son of Nine," they said, when questioned. "We are hastening to our kinsmen in the mountain, since we learn that the kingdom of old is renewed. But who are you that sit in the plain as foes before defended walls?" This, of course, in the polite and rather old-fashioned language the old-fashioned language of such occasions meant simply, "You have no business here. We are going on, so make way, or we shall fight you." They meant to push on between the mountain and the loop of the river, for the narrow land there did not seem to be strongly guarded. Bard, of course, refused to allow the dwarves to go straight on to the mountain. He was determined to wait until the gold and silver had been brought out in exchange for the Arkenstone, for he did not believe that this would be done, if once the fortress was manned with so large and warlike a company. They had brought with them a great store of supplies, for the dwarves can carry very heavy burdens, and nearly all of Dain's folk, in spite of their rapid march, bore huge packs on their backs in addition to their weapons. They're like pack mules, super strong. They would stand a siege for weeks, and by that time yet more dwarves might come, and yet more, for Thorin had many relatives. Also, they would be able to reopen and guard some other gate, so that the besiegers would have to encircle the whole mountain, and for that they had not sufficient numbers. These were, in fact, precisely their plans, for the raven messengers had been busy between Thorin and Dain. But for the moment, the way was barred, so after angry words the dwarf messengers retired, muttering in their beards. Bard then sent messengers at once to the gate, but they found no gold or payment. Arrows came forth as soon as they were within shot, and they hastened back in dismay. In the camp all was now astir, as if for battle, for the dwarves of Dain were advancing along the eastern bank. Pardon me. "Fools!" laughed Bard. "To come thus beneath the mountain's arm! They do not understand war above ground, whatever they may know of battle in the mines. There are many of our archers and spearmen now hidden in the rocks upon their right flank. Dwarf mail may be good, but they will soon be hard put to it. Let us set on them now from both sides, before they are fully rested." But the Elven King said, "Long will I tarry, ere I begin this war for gold. The dwarves cannot pass us unless we will, or do anything that we cannot mark. Let us hope still for something that will bring reconciliation. Our advantage in numbers will be enough, if in the end it must come to unhappy blows." See? Thranduil's not a complete asshole, okay? He doesn't want to get in a huge battle with the dwarves. But he reckoned without the dwarves. The knowledge that the Arkenstone was in the hands of the besiegers burned in their thoughts. Also, they guessed the hesitation of Bard and his friends, and resolved to strike while they debated. See, rude. Dwarves are rude. Suddenly, without a signal, they sprang silently forward to attack. Bows twanged and arrows whistled. Battle was about to be joined. Still more suddenly, a darkness came with a dreadful swiftness. A black cloud hurried over the sky. Winter thunder on a wild wind rolled roaring up and rumbled in the mountain, and lightning lit its peak. And beneath the thunder another blackness could be seen whirling forward, but it did not come with the wind. It came from the north, like a vast cloud of birds, so dense that no light could be seen between their wings. "Halt!" cried Gandalf, who appeared suddenly and stood alone with arms uplifted, between the advancing dwarves and the ranks awaiting them. "Halt!" he called in a voice like thunder, and his staff blazed forth with a flash like the lightning. "Dread has come upon you all, alas! It has come more swiftly than I guessed. The goblins are upon you, Bolg of the North is coming, Odain, whose father you slew in Moria. Behold, the bats are above his army like a sea of locusts. They ride upon wolves, and wargs are in their train." Amazement and confusion fell upon them all. Even as Gandalf had been speaking, the darkness grew. The dwarves halted and gazed at the sky. The elves cried out in many voices. With many voices. "Come," called Gandalf. "There is time for counsel." There is yet time for counsel. "Let Dain, son of Nine, come swiftly to us." So began a battle that none had expected, and it was called the Battle of Five Armies, and it was very terrible. Upon one side were the goblins and the wild wolves, and upon the other were elves and men and dwarves. This is how it fell out. Ever since the fall of the great goblin of the Misty Mountains, the hatred of their race for the dwarves had been rekindled to fury. Messengers had passed to and fro between all their cities, colonies, and strongholds, for they resolved now to win the dominion of the North. Tidings they had gathered in secret ways, and in all the mountains there was a forging and an arming. Then they marched and gathered by hill and valley, going ever by tunnel or under dark, until around and beneath the great mountain Gundabad of the North, where was their capital. A vast host was assembled, ready to sweep down in time of storm, unawares upon the south. Then they learned of the death of Smaug, and joy was in their hearts, and they hastened night after night through the mountains, and came thus at last on a sudden from the north hard on the heels of Dain. Not even the ravens knew of their coming until they came out in the broken lands which divided the lonely mountain from the hills behind. How much Gandalf knew cannot be said, but it is plain that he had not expected this sudden assault. This is the plan that he made in council with the Elven King and with Bard, and with Dain, for the Dwarf Lord now joined them. The goblins were the foes of all, and at their coming all other quarrels were forgotten. Their only hope was to lure the goblins into the valley between the arms of the mountain, and themselves to man the great spurs that struck south and east. Yet this would be perilous if the goblins were in sufficient numbers to overrun the mountain itself, and so attack them also from behind and above. But there was no time to make any other plan or to summon any help. Soon the thunder passed, rolling away to the southeast, but the bat cloud came, flying lower, over the shoulder of the mountain, and whirled above them, shutting out the light and filling them with dread. "To the mountain!" called Bard. "To the mountain! Let us take our places while there is yet time!" On the southern spur, in its lower slopes, and in the rocks at its feet, the elves were set. On the western spur were men and dwarves. But Bard and some of the nimblest of men and elves climbed to the height of the eastern shoulder to gain a view to the north. Soon they could see the lands before the mountain's feet black with a hurrying multitude. Ere long the vanguard swirled around the spur's end and came rushing into Dale. These were the swiftest wolf riders, and already their cries and howls rent the air afar. A few brave men were strung before them to make a feint of resistance, and many there fell before the rest drew back and fled to either side. As Gandalf had hoped, the goblin army had gathered behind the resisted vanguard, and poured now in rage into the valley, driving wildly up between the arms of the mountain, seeking for the foe. Their banners were countless, black and red, and they came on like a tide in fury and disorder. It was a terrible battle. the most dreadful of all Bilbo's experiences, and the one which at the time he hated most, which is to say, it was the one he was most proud of, and most fond of recalling long afterwards, although he was quite unimportant in it. Actually, I may say he put on his ring early in the business and vanished from sight, if not from all danger. A magic ring of that sort is not a complete protection in the goblin charge, nor does it stop flying arrows and wild spears, but it does help in getting out of the way, and it prevents your head from being specially chosen for a sweeping stroke by a goblin swordsman. The elves were the first to charge. Their hatred for the goblins is cold and bitter. Their spears and swords shone in the gloom with a gleam of chill flame. So deadly was the wrath of the hands that held them. As soon as the host of their enemies was dense in the valley, they sent against it a shower of arrows, and each flickered as it fled, as if with stinging fire. Behind the arrows, 1,000 of their spearmen leapt down and charged. The yells were deafening. The rocks were stained black with goblin blood. Just as the goblins were recovering from the onslaught and the elf charge was halted, there rose from across the valley a deep-throated roar, with cries of "Moria!" and "Dane! Dane!" The dwarves of the Iron Hills plunged in, wielding their mattocks, upon the other side, and beside them came the men of the lake with long swords. Panic came upon the goblins, and even as they turned to meet this new attack, the elves charged again with renewed numbers. Already many of the goblins were flying back down the river to escape from the trap, and many of their own wolves were turning upon them and rending the dead and the wounded. That's what you get. That's what you get. Victory seemed at hand when a cry rang on the heights above. Goblins had scaled the mountain from the other side, and already many were on the slopes above the gate, and others were streaming down recklessly, heedless of those that fell screaming from cliff and precipice, to attack the spurs from above. Each of these could be reached by paths that ran down from the main mass of the mountain in the center, and the defenders had too few to bar the way for long. Victory now vanished from hope. They had only stemmed the first onslaught of the black tide. Day drew on. The goblins gathered again in the valley. There a host of wargs came ravening, and with them came the bodyguard of Bolg, goblins of huge size with scimitars of steel. Soon actual darkness was coming into a stormy sky. What is even happening with my accent right now? Soon actual darkness was coming into the stormy sky, while still the great bats swirled about the heads and ears of elves and men, or fastened vampire-like on the stricken. Vampire bats. Now Bard was fighting to defend the eastern spur, and yet giving slowly back, and the elf lords were at bay about their king upon the southern arm, near to the watch-post on Ravenhill. Suddenly there was a great shout, and from the gate came a trumpet call. They had forgotten Thorin! Fools. Part of the wall, moved by levers, fell outward with a crash into the pool. Out leapt the king under the mountain, and his companions followed him. Hood and cloak were gone. They were in shining armor, and red light leapt from their eyes. In the gloom the great dwarf gleamed like gold in a dying fire. Rocks were hurled down from on high by the goblins above, but they held on, leapt down to the fall's foot, and rushed forward to battle. Wolf and rider fell or fled before them. Thorin wielded his axe with mighty strokes, and nothing seemed to harm him. "To me! To me, elves and men, to me, oh my kinsfolk, he cried, and his voice shook like a horn in the valley. Down, heedless of order, rushed all the dwarves of Dain to his help. Down, too, came many of the lakemen, for Bard could not restrain them. And out upon the other side came many of the spearmen of the elves. Once again the goblins were stricken in the valley, and they were piled in heaps till Dale was dark and hideous with their corpses. The wargs were scattered, and Thorin drove right against the bodyguard of Bolg. But he could not pierce their ranks. Yeah, exactly. No one tries to steal my gold except man-elves and hobbits, said the king under the mountain to the goblins. Battlebeards. The bat cloud sounds like a Batman gadget. I mean, you're not wrong. Hey, thank you for the pride flag, Jay. Appreciate that. And hey, Onyx. We're finishing up the Hobbit. Once I'm done, I will jump on and we will continue character building for D&D. Because yes, everybody, I have made a character. Both Onyx and I have made bards, so we need to confer so that we will be complementary bards and not have too much overlap, or else our party will have one bard too many. And just watch, it would be my bard who dies. Okay, where was I? Okay, so Thorin is going against the bodyguard of Bolg, but he cannot pierce their ranks. Already behind him among the goblin dead lay many men and many dwarves, and many a fair elf that should have lived yet long ages merrily in the wood. And as the valley widened, his onset grew ever slower. His numbers were too few. His flanks were unguarded. Soon the attackers were attacked, and they were forced into a great ring facing every way, hemmed all about with goblins and wolves returning to the assault. The bodyguard of Bolg came howling against them, and drove in upon their ranks like waves upon cliffs of sand. Their friends could not help them, for the assault from the mountain was renewed and redoubled with force. And upon either side men and elves were being slowly beaten down. On all this, Bilbo looked with misery. He had taken his stand on Ravenhill among the elves, partly because there was more chance of escape from that point, and partly, with the more tookish part of his mind, because if he was going to be in the last desperate stand, he preferred, on the whole, to defend the Elven King. Really? Gandalf, too, I may say, was there, sitting on the ground as if in deep thought, preparing, I suppose, for some last blast of magic before the end. That did not seem far off. It will not be long now, thought Bilbo, before the goblins win the gate, and we are all slaughtered or driven down and captured. Really, it is enough to make one weep, after all one has gone through. I would rather old Smaug had been left with all the wretched treasure than that these vile creatures should get it, and poor old Bombur, and Balin and Fili and Kili and all the rest come to a bad end. And Bard, too, and the Lakemen and the merry elves, misery me! I have heard songs of many battles, and I have always understood that defeat may be glorious. It seems very uncomfortable, not to say distressing. I wish I was well out of it. The clouds were torn by the wind, and a red sunset slashed the west. Seeing the sudden gleam in the gloom, Bilbo looked round. He gave a great cry. He had seen a sight that made his heart leap, dark shapes, small yet majestic against the distant glow. "The eagles! The eagles!" he shouted. "The eagles are coming!" Bilbo's eyes were seldom wrong. The eagles were coming down the wind, line after line, in such a host as must have gathered from all the eyries of the north. "The eagles! The eagles!" Bilbo cried, dancing and waving his arms. If the elves could not see him, they could hear him. Soon they, too, took up the cry. and it echoed across the valley. Many wandering eyes looked up. Oh, sorry, wondering, not wandering. Many wondering eyes looked up, though as yet nothing could be seen except the southern shoulders of the mountain. "The eagles!" cried Bilbo once more, but at that moment a stone hurtling from above smote heavily on his helm, and he fell with a crash and knew no more. Thus ends chapter 17. Good job, Bilbo. Aw, thanks, Veronica. Onyx is awesome. And Onyx has a much broader knowledge of fantasy, if I may say. He's read a lot more fantasy than I have. I'm very hyper-focused on Tolkien. I have not read a good many other wonderful stories. So Onyx is awesome in that he has read a lot more than I have. Alright, so here we go, the final chapter. It's the final chapter. Do-do-do-do. Do-do-do-do-do. Yeah, Tolkien really just didn't want to describe the whole battle. To be fair, that was a longer description than most of the battles in the Silmarillion, okay? Hey, nice shirt! Hey, Lee! Welcome, Nerdly Niffler. So, my friend Lee is in the chat over on Twitch right now. This shirt is for their group, Friggin' Nerds Media, over on Twitch. So, if anyone wants to watch a group of bonkers people nerd out over random shit and have a lot of fun playing games, head over to Friggin' Nerds Media. They are a lot of fun to watch. And gotta love, like, the 70s, the 60s, 70s merch. So, the shirt is theirs. I won it in a giveaway. I love it. I love this shirt. Super comfy, too, I may say. Alright, so final chapter. Let's do it. Chapter 18, The Return Journey. When Bilbo came to himself, he was literally by himself. He was lying on the flat stones of Ravenhill, and no one was near. A cloudless day, but cold, was broad above him. He was shaking, and as chilled as stone, but his head burned with fire. "And now I wonder what has happened," he said to himself. "At any rate, I am not yet one of the fallen heroes, but I suppose there is still time enough for that." He sat up painfully. Looking into the valley, he could see no living goblins. After a while, his head cleared a little. He thought he could see elves moving in the rocks below. He rubbed his eyes. Surely there was a camp still in the plain some distance off. There was a coming and going about the gate. Dwarves seemed to be busy removing the wall, but all was deadly still. There was no call and no echo of a song. Sorrow seemed to be in the air. "Victory after all, I suppose," he said, feeling his aching head. "Well, it seems a very gloomy business." Suddenly he was aware of a man climbing up and coming towards him. "Hello there," he called with a shaky voice. "Hello there, what news?" "What voice is that speaks among the stones?" said the man, halting and peering about him not far from where Bilbo sat. Then Bilbo remembered his ring. "Well, I'm blessed," said he. "This invisibility has its drawbacks after all. Otherwise, I suppose I might have spent a warm and comfortable night in bed." "It's me, Bilbo Baggins, companion of Thorin," he cried, hurriedly taking off the ring. "It is well that I have found you," said the man, striding forward. "You were needed, and we have looked for you long. You would have been numbered among the dead, who are many, if Gandalf the wizard had not said your voice was last heard in this place. I have been sent to look here for the last time. Are you much hurt?" "A nasty knock on the head, I think," said Bilbo. "But I have a helm and a hard skull. And all the same, I feel sick and my legs are like straws." "I will carry you down to the camp in the valley," said the man, and picked him up lightly. The man was swift and sure-footed. It was not long before Bilbo was set down before a tent in Dale. And there stood Gandalf with his arm in a sling. Even the wizard had not escaped without a wound, and there were few unharmed in all the host. When Gandalf saw Bilbo, he was delighted. "Baggins!" he exclaimed. "Well, I never! Alive after all, I am glad. I began to wonder if even your luck would see you through. A terrible business, and it nearly was disastrous. But other news can wait. Come!" he said more gravely. "You are called for." And leading the hobbit, he took him within the tent. "Hail, Thorin," he said, as he entered. "I have brought him." There indeed lay Thorin Oakenshield, wounded with many wounds, and his rent armor and notched axe were cast upon the floor. He looked up as Bilbo came beside him. "Farewell, good thief," he said. "I go now to the halls, waiting to sit beside my fathers, until the world is renewed. Since I leave now all gold and silver, and go where it is of little worth, I wish to part in friendship from you, and I would take back my words and deeds at the gate." Bilbo knelt on one knee filled with sorrow. "Farewell, King under the mountain," he said. "This is a bitter adventure, if it must end so, and not a mountain of gold can amend it. Yet I am glad that I have shared in your perils. That has been more than any Baggins deserves." "No," said Thorin. "There is more in you of good than you know, child of the kindly West. Some courage and some wisdom blended in measure. If more of us valued food and cheer and song above hoarded gold, it would be a merrier world. But sad or merry, I must leave it now. Farewell." Then Bilbo turned away, and he went by himself and sat alone, wrapped in a blanket, and, whether you believe it or not, he wept until his eyes were red and his voice was hoarse. He was a kindly little soul. Indeed, it was long before he had heart to make a joke again. "A mercy it is," he said at last to himself, "that I woke up when I did. I wish Thorin were living, but I'm glad that we parted in kindness. You're a fool, Bilbo Baggins. You made a great mess of that business with the stone, and there was a battle in spite of all your efforts to buy peace and quiet, but I suppose you can hardly be blamed for that." All that had happened after he was stunned. Bilbo learned later. But it gave him more sorrow than joy, and he was now weary of his adventure. He was aching in his bones for the homeward journey. That, however, was a little delayed, so in the meantime I will tell something of events. The eagles had long had suspicion of the goblins' mustering. From their watchfulness, the movements in the mountains could not be altogether hid. So they too had gathered in great numbers under the great eagle of the misty mountains. And at length, smelling battle from afar, they had come speeding down the gale in the nick of time. They it was who dislodged the goblins from the mountain slopes, casting them over precipices, or driving them down shrieking and bewildered among their foes. It was not long before they had freed the lonely mountain. And the elves and men on either side of the valley could come at last to the help of the battle below. But even with the eagles, they were still outnumbered. In that last hour, Beorn himself had appeared. No one knew how or from where. He came alone and in bear's shape, and he seemed to have grown almost to giant size in his wrath. The roar of his voice was like drums and guns, and he tossed wolves and goblins from his path like straws and feathers. He fell upon their rear, and broke like a clap of thunder through the ring. The dwarves were making a stand still about their lords upon a low rounded hill. Then Beorn stooped and lifted Thorin, who had fallen pierced with spears, and bore him out of the fray. Swiftly he returned, and his wrath was redoubled. so that nothing could withstand him, and no weapon seemed to bite upon him. He scattered the bodyguard, and pulled down Bolg himself and crushed him. Then dismay fell on the goblins, and they fled in all directions. But weariness left their enemies with the coming of new hope, and they pursued them closely, and prevented most of them from escaping where they could. They drove many of them into the running river, and such as fled south or west they hunted into the marshes about the forest river. And there the greater part of the last fugitives perished, while those that came hardly to the wood elves' realm were slain, or drawn in to die deep in the trackless dark of Mirkwood. Songs have said that 3 parts of the goblin warriors in the north perished on that day, and the mountains had peace for many a year. Victory had been assured before the fall of night, but the pursuit was still on foot when Bilbo returned to the camp, and not many were in the valley save the more grievously wounded. "Where are the eagles?" he asked Gandalf that evening, as he lay wrapped in many warm blankets. "Some are in the hunt," said the wizard, "but most have gone back to their eyries. They would not stay here, and departed with first light of morning. Dane has crowned their chief with gold, and sworn friendship with them forever." "I am sorry. I should have liked to see them again," said Bilbo sleepily. "Perhaps I shall see them on my way home. I suppose I shall be going home soon?" "As soon as you like," said the wizard. Actually, it was some days before Bilbo really set out. They buried Thorin deep beneath the mountain, and Bard laid the Arkenstone upon his breast. "There let it lie until the mountain falls," he said. "May it bring good fortune to all his folk that dwell hereafter." Upon his tomb the Elven king then laid Orcrist, the elvish sword that had been taken from Thorin in captivity. It is said in songs that it gleamed ever in the dark if foes approached, and the fortress of the dwarves could not be taken by surprise. There now Dane, son of Nain, took up his abode, and he became king under the mountain, and in time many other dwarves gathered to his throne in the ancient halls. Of the 12 companions of Thorin, 10 remained. Fili and Kili had fallen defending him with shield and body, for he was their mother's elder brother. The others remained with Dain, for Dain dealt his treasure well. Yeah, they remained with him because he dealt his treasure well, of all reasons. There was, of course, no longer any question of dividing the hoard in such shares as had been planned, to Balin and Dwalin, and Dori and Nori and Ori, and Owain and Glóin, and Beaver and Bofer and Bombur, or to Bilbo. Yet a 14th share of all the silver and gold, wrought and unwrought, was given up to Bard, for Dain said, "We will honor the agreement of the dead," and he has now the Arkenstone in his keeping. Even a 14th share was wealth exceedingly great, greater than that of many mortal kings. From the treasure Bard set much gold to the master of Lake Town. He sent it to Lake Town, and he rewarded his followers and friends freely. To the Elven King he gave the emeralds of Girion, such jewels as he most loved, which Dain had restored to him. To Bilbo he said, "This treasure is as much yours as it is mine, though old agreements cannot stand, since so many have a claim in its winnings and defense. Yet even though you were willing to lay aside all your claim, I should wish that the words of Thorin, of which he repented, should not prove true, that we should give you little. I would reward you the most richly of all." "Very kind of you," said Bilbo. "But really it is a relief to me. How on earth should I have got all that treasure home without war and murder all along the way? I don't know. And I don't know what I should have done with it when I got home. I am sure it is better in your hands." In the end, he would only take 2 small chests, one filled with silver and the other with gold, such as one strong pony could carry. "And that will be quite as much as I can manage," said he. At last, the time came for him to say goodbye to his friends. "Farewell, Balin," he said, "and farewell, Dwalin, and farewell, Dori, Nori, Ori, Oin, Gloin, Beaver, Bofer, and Bomber. May your beards never grow thin." And turning towards the mountain, he added, "Farewell, Thorin Oakenshield, and Fili and Kili. May your memory never fade." Then the dwarves bowed low before their gate, but words stuck in their throats. "Goodbye. Good luck, wherever you fare," said Balin at last, "if ever you visit us again. When our halls are made fair once more, then the feast shall indeed be splendid." "If ever you are passing my way," said Bilbo, "don't wait to knock. Tea is at 4. But any of you are welcome at any time." Then he turned away. The elf host was on the march, and if it was sadly lessened, yet many were glad, for now the northern world would be merrier for many a long day. The dragon was dead, and the goblins overthrown, and their hearts looked forward after winter to a spring of joy. Gandalf and Bilbo rode behind the Elven King, and beside them strode Beorn, once again in man's shape, and he laughed and sang in a loud voice upon the road. So they went on until they drew near to the borders of Mirkwood, and to the north of the place where the forest river ran out. Then they halted, for the wizard and Bilbo would not enter the wood, even though the king bade them stay a while in his halls. They intended to go along the edge of the forest and round its northern end in the waste that lay between it and the beginning of the Grey Mountains. It was a long and cheerless road, but now that the goblins were crushed, it seemed safer to them than the dreadful pathways under the trees. Moreover, Beorn was going that way too. "Farewell, O Elven King," said Gandalf. "May merry be the green wood, while the world is yet young, and merry be all your folk." "Farewell, O Gandalf," said the king. "May you ever appear where you are most needed and least expected. The oftener you appear in my halls, the better shall I be pleased." "I beg of you," said Bilbo, stammering and standing on one foot, "to accept this gift." And he brought out a necklace of silver and pearls that Dain had given him at their parting. "In what way have I earned such a gift, O Hobbit?" said the king. "Well, I thought, don't you know," said Bilbo, rather confused, "that some little return should be made for your hospitality. I mean, even a burglar has his feelings. I have drunk much of your wine and eaten much of your bread." "I will take your gift, O Bilbo the Magnificent," said the king gravely, "and I name you elf-friend and blessed. May your shadow never grow less, or stealing would be too easy. Farewell." Then the elves turned toward the forest, and Bilbo started his long road home. I'm going to pause for a second there, because Thranduil makes me smile. He's a practical guy, okay? Just, like as if that would be a normal farewell. May your shadow never grow less. The elves have a thing with light and shadow, okay? So, may your shadow never grow less. Sounds like it would normally be a thing, but just the adding in there of sort of the aside comment of, or stealing shall be too easy. Like, stealing is way too easy, bro, for people like you. May your shadow never grow less, or stealing would be too easy. Farewell. I love it. See, Thranduil was done dirty by Peter Jackson. That is a hill I will die on. It is a hill I will die on. They did Thranduil dirty. They made him such an asshole in the movies, and he's not. He has a sense of humor, okay? Sleep is for the weak. Oh, no worries. It's midnight. Yeah, go to uni. Get some rest. We're almost finished, though. Just a couple more pages. He had many hardships and adventures before he got back. The wild was still the wild, and there are many other things in it those days besides goblins. But he was well guided and well guarded. The wizard was with him, and Beorn for much of the way, and he was never in great danger again. Anyway, by midwinter, Gandalf and Bilbo had come all the way back, along both edges of the forest to the doors of Beorn's house, and there for a while they both stayed. Yuletide was warm and merry there. The men came from far and wide to feast at Beorn's bidding. The goblins of the Misty Mountains were now few and terrified, and hidden in the deepest holes they could find, and the wargs had vanished from the woods, so that men went abroad without fear. Beorn indeed became a great chief afterwards in those regions, and ruled a wide land between the mountains and the wood. And it is said that for many generations the men of his line had the power of taking bear shape, and some were grim men and bad, but most were in heart like Beorn, if less in size and strength. In their day the last goblins were hunted from the Misty Mountains, and a new peace came over the edge of the wild. It was spring, and a fair one with mild weathers and a bright sun, before Bilbo and Gandalf took their leave at last of Beorn. And though he longed for home, Bilbo left with regret, for the flowers of the gardens of Beorn were in springtime no less marvelous than in high summer. At last they came up the long road and reached the very pass where the goblins had captured them before. But they came to that high point at morning, and looking backward, they saw a white sun shining over the outstretched lands. There behind lay Mirkwood, blue in the distance, and darkly green at the nearer edge even in the spring. There far away was the lonely mountain on the edge of eyesight. On its highest peak snow, yet unmelted, was gleaming pale. "So comes snow after fire, and even dragons have their ending," said Bilbo, and he turned his back on his adventure. The Tookish part was getting very tired, and the Baggins was daily getting stronger. "I wish now only to be in my own armchair," he said. Thus ends chapter 18. And I was wrong, there is a chapter 19, it's just very short. So, sorry, chapter 19. I was wrong, that was not the final chapter. This is the final chapter. And it's even called The Last Stage, chapter 19, The Last Stage. It was on May the 1st that the two came back at last to the brink of the valley of Rivendell, where stood the last, or the first, homely house. Again it was evening. Their ponies were tired, especially the one that carried the baggage, and they all felt in need of rest. As they rode down the steep path, Bilbo heard the elves still singing in the trees, as if they had not stopped since he left. And as soon as the riders came down into the lower glades of the wood, they burst into a song of much the same kind as before. This is something like it. Here we go again. "The dragon is withered, his bones are now crumbled, his armor is shivered, his splendor is humbled. Though sword shall be rusted, and throne and crown perish, with strength that men trusted and wealth that they cherish, here grass is still growing, and leaves are yet swinging. The white water flowing, the elves are yet singing, come, tra-la-la-lolly, come back to the valley. The stars are far brighter than gems without measure, the moon is far whiter than silver in treasure. The fire is more shining on hearth in the gloaming than gold won by mining, so why go a-roaming? Oh, tra-la-la-lolly, come back to the valley. Oh, where are you going so late in returning? The river is flowing, the stars are all burning. Oh, whither so laden, so sad and so dreary? Here, elf and elf maiden, now welcome the weary, with tra-la-la-lolly, come back to the valley, tra-la-la-lolly, fa-la-lolly, fa-la." The elves of Rivendell are on something. There's either something in the water, or They have, like, the really good pipe weed. Then the elves of the valley came out and greeted them, and led them across the water to the house of Elrond. There a warm welcome was made them, and there were many eager ears that evening to hear the tale of their adventures. Gandalf it was who spoke, for Bilbo was fallen quiet and drowsy. Most of the tale he knew, for he had been in it, and had himself told much of it to the wizard on their homeward way or in the house of Beorn. But every now and again he would open one eye and listen, when a part of the story which he did not know came in. It was in this way that he learned where Gandalf had been to, for he overheard the words of the wizard to Elrond. It appeared that Gandalf had been to a great council of the White Wizards, masters of lore and good magic, and that they had at last driven the necromancer from his dark hold in the south of Mirkwood. "Ere long now," Gandalf was saying, "the forest will grow somewhat more wholesome. The north will be freed from that horror for many long years, I hope. Yet I wish he were banished from the world." It would be well indeed," said Elrond, "but I fear that will not come about in this age of the world, or for many after." When the tale of their journeyings was told, there were other tales, and yet more tales, tales of long ago, and tales of new things, and tales of no time at all, till Bilbo's head fell forward on his chest, and he snored comfortably in a corner. He woke to find himself in a white bed, with the moon shining through an open window. Below it, many elves were singing loud and clear on the banks of the stream. "Sing, all ye joyful, sing, let's try that again. Sing, all ye joyful, now sing all together. The winds in the treetop, the winds in the heather. The stars are in blossom, the moon is in flower, and bright are the windows of night in her tower. Dance, all ye joyful, now dance all together. Soft is the grass, and let foot be like feather. The river is silver, the shadows are fleeting. Merry is Maytime, and merry our meeting. Sing we now softly, and dreams let us weave him. Wind him in slumber, and there let us leave him. The wanderer sleepeth, now soft be his pillow. Lullaby, lullaby, alder and willow. Sigh no more, pine, to the wind of the morn. Fall moon, dark be the land. Hush, hush, oak, ash, and thorn. Hushed be all water, till dawn is at hand." "Well, merry people," said Bilbo, looking out, what time by the moon is this? Your lullaby would waken a drunken goblin. Yet I thank you." He's like, Jesus, what is that racket? I love that the elves are like screaming a lullaby through his window. Rude. Honestly, that was probably Eladon and Elrohir just playing a freaking joke. Because, according to fandom, they are the sorts. That'd be funny. It's just like, your lullaby would waken a drunken goblin, yet I thank you. And your snores would waken a stone dragon, yet we thank you, they answered with laughter. It is drawing towards dawn, and you have slept now since the night's beginning. Tomorrow, perhaps, you will be cured of weariness. A little sleep does a great cure in the house of Elrond, said he, but I will take all the cure I can get. A second good night, fair friends. And with that he went back to bed and slept till late morning. Weariness fell from him soon in that house, and he had many a merry jest and dance, early and late, with the elves of the valley. Yet even that place could not long delay him now, and he thought always of his home. After a week, therefore, he said farewell to Elrond, and giving him such small gifts as he would accept, he rode away with Gandalf. Even as they left the valley, the sky darkened in the west before them, and wind and rain came up to meet them. "Merry is Maytime," said Bilbo as the rain beat into his face, "but our back is to legends. But our back is to legends, and we are coming home. I suppose this is the first taste of it." "There is a long road yet," said Gandalf. "But it is the last road," said Bilbo. They came to the river that marked the very edge of the borderland of the wild, and to the ford beneath the steep bank, which you may remember. The water was swollen both with the melting of snows at the approach of summer and with the day-long rain, but they crossed with some difficulty and pressed forward as evening fell on the last stage of their journey. This was much as it had been before, except that the company was smaller and more silent. Also, this time there was no trolls. At each point on the road, Bilbo recalled the happenings in the words of a year ago. It seemed to him more like 10, so that, of course, he quickly noted the place where the pony had fallen in the river, and they had turned aside for their nasty adventure with Tom and Bert and Bill. Not far from the road, they found the gold of the trolls, which they had buried, still hidden and untouched. "I have enough to last me my time," said Bilbo, when they had dug it up. "You had better take this, Gandalf. I dare say you can find a use for it." "Indeed I can," said the wizard. "But share and share alike. You may find you have more needs than you expect." So they put the gold in bags and slung them on the ponies, who were not at all pleased about it. After that their going was slower, for most of the time they walked, but the land was green and there was much grass through which the hobbit strolled along contentedly. He mopped his face with a red silk handkerchief. No, not a single one of his own had survived. He had borrowed this one from Elrond. For now June had brought summer, and the weather was bright and hot again. As all things come to an end, even this story, a day came at last when they were in sight of the country where Bilbo had been born and bred, where the shapes of the land and of the coming trees were as well known to him as his hands and toes. Totally botched that. Coming to a rise, he could see his own hill in the distance, and he stopped suddenly and said, "Roads go ever on and on, over rock and under tree, by caves where never sun has shone, by streams that never find the sea, over snow by winter sown, and through the merry flowers of June, over grass and over stone, and under mountains in the moon. Roads go ever, ever on, under cloud and under star, yet feet that wandering have gone turn at last to home afar. Eyes that fire and sword have seen, and horror in the halls of stone, look at last on meadows green, and trees and hills they long have known." Gandalf looked at him. "My dear Bilbo," he said, "something is the matter with you. You are not the hobbit that you were." And so they crossed the bridge and passed the mill by the river, and came right back to Bilbo's own door. "Bless me, what's going on?" he cried. There was a great commotion, and people of all sorts, respectable and unrespectable, were thick round the door, and many were going in and out, not even wiping their feet on the mat, as Bilbo noticed with annoyance. If he was surprised, they were more surprised still. He had arrived back in the middle of an auction. There was a large notice in black and red hung on the gate, stating that on June the 22nd, Messrs. Grubb, and Burrows would sell by auction the effects of the late Bilbo Baggins, Esquire, of Bag End, Underhill, Hobbiton. Sale to commence at 10 o'clock sharp. It was now nearly lunch-time, and most of the things had already been sold, for various prices, from next to nothing to old songs, as is not unusual at auctions. Bilbo's cousins, the Sackville Bagginses, were, in fact, busy measuring his rooms to see if their own furniture would fit. In short, Bilbo was presumed dead, and not everybody that said so was sorry to find the presumption wrong. The return of Mr. Bilbo Baggins created quite a disturbance, both under the hill and over the hill, and across the water. It was a great deal more than a 9 days' wonder. The legal bother, indeed, lasted for years. It was quite a long time before Mr. Baggins was in fact admitted to be alive again. The people who had got specially good bargains at the sale took a deal of convincing, and in the end, to save time, Bilbo had to buy back quite a lot of his own furniture. Many of his silver spoons mysteriously disappeared and were never accounted for. Personally, he suspected the Sackville Bagginses. On their side, they never admitted that the returned Baggins was genuine, and they were not on friendly terms with Bilbo ever after. They really had wanted to live in his nice hobbit hole so very much. Indeed, Bilbo found he had lost more than spoons. He had lost his reputation. It is true that forever after he remained an elf friend, and had the honor of dwarves, wizards, and all such folk as ever passed that way, but he was no longer quite respectable. He was in fact held by all the hobbits of the neighborhood to be queer, except by his nephews and nieces on the Took side, but even they were not encouraged in their friendship by their elders. See, Bilbo's queer. Happy Pride Month. I am sorry to say he did not mind. He was quite content, and the sound of the kettle on his hearth was ever more musical than it had been in the quiet days before the unexpected party. His sword he hung over the mantelpiece. His coat of mail was arranged on a stand in the hall until he lent it to a museum. His gold and silver was largely spent in presents, both useful and extravagant, which to a certain extent accounts for the affection of his nephews and nieces. His magic ring he kept a great secret, for he chiefly used it when unpleasant callers came. He took to writing poetry and visiting the elves, and though many shook their heads and touched their foreheads and said, "Poor old Baggins," and though few believed any of his tales, he remained very happy to the end of his days, and those were extraordinarily long. One autumn evening, some years afterwards, Bilbo was sitting in his study writing his memoirs. He thought of calling them There and Back Again, A Hobbit's Holiday, when there was a ring at the door. It was Gandalf and a dwarf, and the dwarf was actually Balin. Come in," said Bilbo, and soon they were settled in chairs by the fire. If Balin noticed that Mr. Baggins' waistcoat was more extensive, and had real gold buttons, Bilbo also noticed that Balin's beard was several inches longer, and his jeweled belt was of great magnificence. They fell to talking of their times together, of course, and Bilbo asked how things were going in the lands of the mountain. It seemed they were going very well. Bard had rebuilt the town of Dale, and men had gathered to him from the lake and from the south and west, and all the valley had become tilled again and rich, and the desolation was now filled with birds and blossoms in spring, and fruit and feasting in autumn. And Lake Town was refounded and was more prosperous than ever, and much wealth went up and down the running river, and there was friendship in those parts between elves and dwarves and men. It's actually really significant. The old master had come to a bad end. Bard had given him much gold for the help of the lake people, but being of the kind that easily catches such disease, he fell under the dragon sickness, and took most of the gold and fled with it, and died of starvation in the waste, deserted by his companions. The new master is of wiser kind, said Balin, and very popular, for, of course, he gets most of the credit for the present prosperity. They are making songs which say that in his day the rivers run with gold. And then the prophecies of old songs have turned out to be true after a fashion, said Bilbo. Of course, said Gandalf. And why should they not prove true? Surely you don't disbelieve the prophecies, because you had a hand in bringing them about yourself? You don't really suppose, do you, that all your adventures and escapes were managed by mere luck, just for your sole benefit? You are a very fine person, Mr. Baggins, and I am very fond of you. But you are only quite a little fellow in a wide world, after all. Thank goodness, said Bilbo, laughing, and handed him the tobacco jar. And thus ends The Hobbit. There's a note at the bottom that says, if you are interested in hobbits, you will learn a lot more about them in The Lord of the Rings. The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, The Return of the King. And now we have a couple illustrations I can share at the back of the book. Yay! Oh, thank you so much, Wonderek. Thank you. I probably saw that super late, but hi, and thank you. It's super late in Poland. Get some rest. Yeah, queer rep. Bag End is a queer place, and its folk are queerer. Thus my Pride merch, which I have not yet received mine in the mail. I'm still waiting on it. So, shameless self-promotion if anybody wants some Lord of the Rings based Pride Month merch, please see the link in my bio up in TikTok, or go down to my wizardwaykris.creator-spring.com. That is my Pride merch link. Goes to my Teespring. All proceeds go to my top surgery, and we are closing in on almost $4,000, which just boggles the mind. Like, the support that I've gotten through my own merch, through doing my Elvish translations this month, and also from the portion that I get from Don Marshall's merch, because I helped with the design and he wanted to put money toward my top surgery. Between all of that, I'm closing in on almost $4,000. That's the most I've made in a single month, I think, ever. I think ever. Even when I was working super hard, I tended to only make about $2,000 a month maximum. So this is bonkers, and I thank you all sincerely from the bottom of my heart for helping me with my top surgery expenses. Oh my gosh, you're right, Darnok. Poor Bilbo, he has to buy new spoons. Also, just the humor of that for anyone who is a spoonie, for someone who has chronic illness. He has to buy new spoons. Well, that's just rude. As if after that journey he has any spoons left. That's funny. Yeah, like, this is more than I was expecting when it comes to my merch and the support, so anything past this is gravy. If I get to $5,000, I'm gonna be so astounded. You were right about the dwarves. Spoons are the most useful utensil. Spoons are definitely helpful. Especially if you manage to get a spoon that has a sharpened edge, so it can be used as a bit of a knife. Yeah. Those are cool spoons. Okay, let's switch up the view so you guys can see the illustrations. Hopefully this works. Oh, uncover the camera. There we go. Ta-da! Okay. So here is the illustration. That is, if it'll focus. Come on. Come on. It really doesn't want to focus, does it? There we go. There we go. The Hall at Bag End, residence of B. Baggins, Esquire. I love the little clock. So there is the picture there. And then, of course, at the back we have our maps. So, this is the map of the land beyond the Misty Mountains, or the Hithaeglir. I remember loving this map so much when I first saw it. I thought it was like the coolest thing ever. With like the if I bring it really close, you can see like all of the spider webs and the spiders. Like, I loved the way this map was constructed. I think it's so cool. Thank you for the rose. Thank you, Jay. And then of course we have our Smaug up top. The Grey Mountains and the Withered Heath up at the top, and Gundabad is all the way up here. So, very cool stuff. I know it's flipped on TikTok, so you're not going to be able to read anything, but the maps are just so good. And then we just have a page with other works, other Tolkien works. So that is it. With that, we conclude The Hobbit. We read the whole book in under 1 month. In under 2 months. Under 2 months we read the book. Which for only reading once a week is really good. That's a fair pace. You could definitely, like, depending on how quickly you read, you could have read this book in about a week. If you read about 40 pages a day, which is what we did, if you read about 40 pages a day, you can finish The Hobbit in 1 week. You just gotta dedicate the time to it. Alright, so that was an hour and a half. We are pretty much done, and I actually do need to get back onto Discord and start building my character over there. I'm excited. So I have a character for D&D. I've never played D&D before, but I'm looking forward to the role-playing aspect of it. I know literally nothing about dice and character sheets and stats and spells and shit. I know, like, literally nothing about D&D, but I do have years of experience in role-playing, just in text format instead. So moving into sort of a live-action roleplay, not full-on LARPing, because obviously we're not doing costumes, and we're not going to be up and about acting around each other. It'll still be tabletop, but moving into a real-time, actually speaking roleplay is going to be a lot of fun for me. I'm really looking forward to it. Is my bard going to be an elf? Yes. Yes. I mean, this campaign is going to be placed in Middle-earth, so it's still within Tolkien's world, but we're doing it as a D&D campaign. So yeah, the languages will still be Tolkien. We've just given them equivalents in D&D, apparently. I don't know. Again, I don't know D&D, so I don't know exactly how this is working, but it sounds really cool. But yes, my elf's name is Gwylenor. Gwylenor. Which is... It's a Sindarin name that means... Gwai is, like in the name Gwaihir, the Eagle Lord. Gwai is not just wind, because I know it's simplified to Wind Lord, but Gwai is the sound that a storm makes, the sound that wind makes. So it's musical in nature, but it is specifically the song of a storm. So that, and then Lin is a pool. So it's I constructed the name to be the sound of a storm creating a pool of water, which is a very specific and very freaking elvish bard thing. Because the sound of water falling on stone was the first sound that the elves heard when they awoke upon the shores of Cuiviénen, way back in the day. When the elves first awoke, the first thing they heard was water falling on stone, and the first thing they saw were the stars. So both of those things have a very deep significance in elven culture, and thus I named my character Gwylenor. So it's like, the direct translation is just storm pool, which doesn't sound poetic in the slightest, but when you look at the actual roots of the words and the cultural significance behind those words, it makes a lot more sense. My Hero Forge character ain't no slouch either. He's pretty sexy. Let me see if I can bring that up. I will. I think I can pull in. Yeah, let me add a source here and I'll try to bring it up. I have to reload the page. I was messing around with stuff in Hero Forge. Like you do. Oh no, it messed with it again. I didn't save it like that. Cannot undo. Dang. Okay, I'm gonna have to mess with things again. Can I go back to the pose I was in previously? Question mark? Oh shoot. It undid my pose. That took me so long too. I'm so angry. I don't know why it won't go back to what it was before. That's so frustrating. That is so incredibly frustrating. Well, in any case, I can mess with the pose live then. It's fine. Let me add the window capture. There it is. So there's my character. So if you're watching over on YouTube or Twitch, you should be able to see my character now. That's him. So he is Bard. And he has piercings and tattoos and scars from not being prepared for a battle he was tossed into. So you can't quite see it easily, but he has like some really ragged scars along his back. I had repositioned him heavily in my actual saved file. But this is him. He got a nice booty, too. He got a nice booty, I'll admit it. Also, I thought it would be funny to give him... what's it called? Heterochromia? Heterochromia, where you have eyes that are two different colors. So he's got a green eye and a brown eye. The brown eye having been damaged and healed from a wound. He only looks playful because of his expression, honestly. Like, if I take the cockiness out, like, he looks a lot more severe like that. Gotta love those freckles, though, am I right? Like the freckles, though. He looks good. Very, very. The expression makes a huge difference in the perceived attitude of the character. In the spirit of the Hobbit, does he own a bag of silver spoons? No, no, he does not. Though with how reclusive the elves of Assyrian are, it would make sense for him to have like his own utensils and such. I'm really happy with this character design. I'm proud of the work I've done here. Look at them boots. And he's definitely a character that's going to use song as like a magical battle element. But not very big on the whole strength part. He's got a chakram. That's like the only weapon I gave him is a chakram. Like, and that's like a last ditch effort. If you've got a chakram with a hold in the center of it, like you can use that as a slashing weapon. Like if you really have to, you can make it work, but not easily. Not easily. And you can throw it, but like it doesn't come back like in Xena, okay? Like chakrams do not act like boomerangs. They don't come back to you. If you hit something, it doesn't come back. And unless I get like just a nat 20 roll on something where it rebounds a bunch of times and comes right back. But then it would be a projectile coming at me, and I'd probably have to make another roll to catch it. Danger frisbee. Yeah, no kidding. But that's the character. I like him. I like him a lot. I took hours in Hero Forge messing with all of the textures and colors and the whole thing. I panicked too because when I started my edit, I didn't have an account already set up on Hero Forge, and so I went to go save it, and it was like, "Do you have an account?" And I was like, "No." Luckily, the way that I went about getting my account, it saved my progress. Otherwise, like I was worried that because I didn't have an account, if I went to go make an account, it would delete it and start the page over again. So I panicked and I took pictures of literally every setting that I had done. It took me hours to do all of this, and so I went through and I took pictures of my screen. So I would have all of the settings and could recreate him from scratch if I had to. And luckily it saved my progress, so I didn't have to do that. But I had a lot of fun creating this guy. Like, even with the ombre hair, like, ombre hair, we got some scars here and there, we got the tattoos. I put, like, dirt and grime and texture on, like, his weapon, and, like, there are fingerprint smudges on the flute. Like, I went all out, okay? Like, I'm not gonna lie, I had so much fun. It's so much fun. So yeah, he's a lot of fun. He's gonna be fun to play with. Random low kick. I like this one though. This is like someone's giving like a crazy performance here. I love it. So much drama. But what a fun character. And I know one of you was asking, oh yeah, he has multiple instruments. He's not a one-man band. You can only play one of those instruments at a time. But, you know, different kinds of music for different kinds of occasions. Not everything, you know, can be covered with an ocarina. I wanted to give him an ocarina, though. I tried to keep his instruments something that I think would be within the skill of a wood elf to manufacture on his own. That he would have fabricated all of these himself. He would have made his own instruments. So probably a lot of wooden flutes rather than the metal one that I have here. But I figured he would have a nice metal flute for the road. Something that's a bit more durable and wouldn't just, you know, fall apart if something smacked it. message me when I'm going onto voice chat. I will be shortly. Like, give me literally a couple minutes. But I just wanted to share this with everybody. So that's my basic character build. Having a lot of fun with it, and can't wait to make a character sheet, which is what Annex is going to help me with. So that is what I have done. I'm really excited about it. And so yeah, we have one more live stream on Saturday where we will be finishing up the Lays of Beleriand. So we'll be finishing the existing stuff for the Lay of Lathian, which is Beren and Luthien's story in poetic form. Epic poetry. So if you guys want to stay tuned for that, that will be coming on Saturday, and then I'm going to be taking a good week or two off. And then we'll hit Lord of the Rings hard and fast. So hopefully everybody has enjoyed The Hobbit. We finished it up today. I'm very happy about that. And we will finish up Lays of Beleriand this weekend. So everybody please take care. I'm going to go get some work done and work on my character sheets and stuff, because I don't know what the heck I'm doing. Annex is here to help me because I don't play D&D. But take care, everybody, and I will see you guys at the very least on Saturday, if not before then. So take care. I love you guys. Bye!